They are burning it down.
Now, last Thursday night, Manager Jeffries provided us with the Democrat standard for abuse of power. He said, quote, "Abuse of power occurs when the president exercises his official power to obtain a corrupt personal benefit while ignoring or injuring the national interest." Mr. Jeffries and the House managers contend that under this standard, President Trump has committed an impeachable offense and must be immediately removed from office. But if Manager Jeffries' standard applies, then where were these same Democrats' calls for impeachment when uncontroverted smoking gun evidence emerged that President Obama had violated their standard? The American people understand this basic notion as equal justice under the law. It is as American as apple pie. Yet the House managers want to apply their own version of selective justice here, which applies only to their political opponents. They want one system of justice for Democrats and another system of justice for everyone else. But you do not need to take my word for it. Let's walk through the facts. On March 26, 2012, on the eve of the 2012 Nuclear Security Summit in Seoul, South Korea, President Obama met with Russian President Dmitry Medvedev to discuss one of the pressing issues in the United States' national security interest, military defense. How important was the issue of missile defense to the strategic relationship between the U.S. and Russia? As President Obama's Defense Secretary Robert Gates said in June 2010, upgraded missile interceptors in development, quote, would give us the ability to protect our troops, our bases, our facilities, and our allies in Europe. Gates continued, there is nothing of the minds on missile defense. There is no meeting of the minds on missile defense. The Russians hate it. They've hated it since the late 1960s. They will always hate it, mostly because we'll build it and they won't. During the Nuclear Security Summit, President Obama had a private exchange with Russian President Medvedev that was picked up on a hot microphone.
Last election, yeah. And after my election, I have more flexibility.
Yeah, I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir and understand.
President Obama said on all these issues, but particularly missile defense, this can be solved, but it's important for him to give me space. President Medvedev responded, yeah, I understand your message about space for you. President Obama, this is my last election. After my election, I will have more flexibility. President Medvedev responds, I understand. I will transmit this information to Vladimir. As we all know, it's Vladimir Putin. As you just saw in 2012, President Obama asked the Russians for space until after the upcoming 2012 election, after which he would have more flexibility. Now, let me apply Mr. Jeffries and the House managers' three-part test for abuse of power. 1, the president exercises his official power. President Obama's actions clearly meet the test for exercising official power because in his role as head of state during a nuclear security summit, after asking President Medvedev for space, he promised him that, quote, missile defense can be solved. What else could that mean but solved in a way favorable to the Russians, who were dead set against the expansion of a U.S. missile defense system in Europe? 2, to obtain a corrupt personal benefit. President Obama's actions were clearly for his own corrupt personal benefit because he was asking an adversary for space, for the express purpose of furthering his own election chances. Again, President Obama said, this is my last election. After my election, I have more flexibility. President Obama knew the importance of missile defense in Europe, but decided to use that as a bargaining chip with the Russians to further his own election chances in 2012. 3, while ignoring or injuring our national interest. As President Obama's defense secretary said, missiles would give us the ability to protect our troops, our bases, our facilities, and our allies in Europe. Surely, sacrificing the ability to protect our troops and our allies would injure the national interest. Yet President Obama was willing to barter away the safety of our troops and the safety of our allies in exchange for space in the upcoming election. In short, President Obama leveraged the power of his office to the detriment of U.S. policy on missile defense in order to influence the 2012 election, solely to his advantage. And we never would have known had President Obama realized that the microphone was on, that there was a hot mic. One could easily substitute President Obama's 2000 exchange with President Medvedev into Article 1 of the House's impeachment articles against President Trump. Using the powers of his high office, President Obama solicited interference of a foreign government, Russia, in the 2012 United States presidential election. He did so through a scheme or course of conduct that included soliciting the government of Russia to give him space, quote unquote, on missile defense that would benefit his reelection and influence the 2012 United States presidential election to his advantage. In doing so, President Obama used the powers of the presidency in a manner that compromised the national security of the United States and undermined the integrity of the United States democratic process. He thus ignored and injured the interests of the nation. Close quote. Does it sound familiar, House managers? It should, as the case against President Obama would have been far stronger than the allegations against President Trump. President Obama's abuse of power to benefit his own political interests was there and is here now for everyone to hear. It was a direct, unquestionable quid pro quo. No mind reading was needed there. Where were the House managers then?